I think a lot of people would agree that the mid-80s were a very unique time for anime and otaku culture in Japan. I also think a lot of people would agree that it was the best time for anime and otaku culture in Japan. Many huge franchises like Macross, Urusei Yatsura, Gundam, Cobra, and Dirty Pair, just to name a few, were quickly establishing this as the decade to be an anime fan. Plus, thanks to the bubble economy and many other outside factors, people had money to throw at this stuff, so not only was it a great time to be a fan, it was a great time to be a creator. So of course, as the scene and culture grew, so did the types of media produced both for it and from it. We were quickly starting to enter an era where the industry had been around long enough that hardcore otaku were entering the workforce. These were the otaku that were influenced by the industry to start with, the industry that made them hardcore otaku. So that means we were finally at the point where otaku were making anime for other otaku. Heaven help us all. We had seen this earlier in the decade with fan-made projects like Daikon 3 and 4, but soon enough, these types of otaku would move on to real jobs, making real anime about anime for the masses. So, enter Project A-ko, an anime film released in June 1986 to rave reviews. This was a genre-defining parody of all the hottest anime franchises from the past that somehow became an anime classic itself. This thing was a huge success when it released in Japan, and it even became one of the first anime movies to have a real impact in America once it hit Blockbuster and Suncoast shelves all over the country, followed by a victory lap on American TV on the Sci-Fi Channel as part of their Saturday anime block. You see, Project A-ko somehow achieved something very rare. It was a huge fan letter to the scene that spawned it, but it also could be viewed by somebody without any knowledge of said scene and still enjoy it because, let's just say it, Project A-ko was great. It still is great, and it always will be great. This is a film by otaku for otaku, but the drunk guy next door to you that didn't even know there was a country outside of America could still enjoy this because, well, the whole schoolgirl blowing up cities and fighting robots aspect of it all. Many people say that Project A-ko was one of the very first pieces of anime they ever saw, and most of those people still love it to this day. It was such a big deal in America that even one of the original anime cons, Project A-kon, named itself after that. Sure, they eventually simplified their name to A-kon for some reason, but it will always be known by so many old school fans as Project A-kon forever. That might not seem like a big deal, but think about it. How many anime cons are named after a specific franchise? I don't see Captain Harlock Con. I don't see Mezzoforte Furry Fest Extravaganza. I don't even see Mad Bull 34 Mariachi MegaCon, so I think I rest my case. Needless to say, Project A-ko went on to be one of the defining pieces of media for the entire anime genre and is still looked at fondly today. So, with that being said, anyone remember Cosmo's Pink Shock? No? Well, that's fair. Project A-ko was released June 21st, 1986. Cosmo's Pink Shock was released as a VHS OVA exactly 1 month later, July 21st, 1986. So while it seems impossible that Cosmo's Pink Shock could have ripped off Project A-ko, it sure doesn't feel that way nowadays when you watch it. There's certainly more to Cosmo's Pink Shock than it just feeling like a cheap clone of a much more successful anime. There's even more to how it was released and when it was released, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But in the scheme of things, it's impossible and somewhat unfortunate, at least for the Cosmo's Pink Shock anime, to ignore these similarities when you watch them both now. So with all of that out of the way, what exactly is Cosmo's Pink Shock even about? Well, it's a parody anime starring a redheaded anime girl that's about the right age to be in high school. She doesn't seem to go to high school because she's flying through space and all, but I guess they don't teach space adventures in school anyway, so good on her for following her dreams. Soon enough, she flies this ship through a mecha baseball game that causes the team to lose, something that doesn't happen very often, so the entire place gets mad at her and decides to chase her through space. Well, lucky for her, her ship is very fast, but not fast enough to not get invaded by a dreamy yet creepy captain from another ship. They reminisce for a bit, and soon enough, the whole thing wraps up with her ship, the Cosmo's Pink Shock, flying away with tons of angry mech baseball fans still in hot pursuit. There's also some references to Macross and Gundam along the way, hence the whole parody aspect of this. They're kind of funny, but also kind of forgettable, but they are present. And even with this thin story, don't think this anime is a complete waste of your time. I enjoyed it quite a bit for what it is. It really does feel like one of those anime that was made by otaku for otaku, but it also seems like these otaku didn't quite understand every aspect about making an anime just yet. However, since it is a more professional package, it does lose some of the charm of the more fan-made projects as well. And here's the real kicker. This thing was made by Studio AIC. If you don't recognize that name, you will certainly recognize their work. They are responsible for Bubblegum Crisis, Ixer 1, boatloads of Tenchi, Call Me Tonight, and of course, the modern day classic, Orimo. So yeah, they've done a lot. And it doesn't end there. The main character's voice actress is the same voice acting goddess that voiced Shampoo and Ranma. That's right, Rei Sakuma. Yeah, there's some talent behind this thing. But despite these legends involved, somehow it did fall just a bit flat. Well, that's unfortunate. I guess everyone does have to start somewhere, so what happened? Well, the animation is pretty good with some nice character designs that are oh so 80s, and I love that. But the story, as we mentioned earlier, is nothing to write home about. The sound design and voice acting are also just kind of okay, and the comedy was supposed to be one of the selling points, but also is just kind of okay. However, with this being released just a month after the masterpiece that was Project A-ko, it's awfully hard to watch this thing and not think that it's just the same type of concept executed not quite as well. Look, I have a bias for 80s anime, so I love this kind of stuff, even if it is kind of a bad version of it, and I don't think this OVA is bad at all. It's just kind of there. Plus, it just kind of feels like a pilot for a series they wanted to do a lot more with, but since it was not super successful or well executed, nothing else happened with this, which is just kind of sad because the character designs were pretty okay, and the basic ideas could have went on to be even better. This could have been a successful series. But we still haven't even touched on the most unique and interesting aspect of this release, have we? Remember how I said this was released on a nice shiny brand new VHS tape on July 21st, 1986? Well, that is when this was released as an OVA on VHS to the world, but this thing was released in 3 separate bite-sized pieces of otaku bliss as part of the Anime Vision video magazine on the VHD format in Japan earlier in the year of 1986. Wait, what's that? You don't know what a VHD is? What's wrong with you? How do you not know everything there is to know about this super obscure video format that was only released in Japan in the early 80s and was not really successful at all compared to VHS tapes, Laserdisc, or even Betamax tapes? I thought everyone was a VHD head these days. They really need to start teaching the important life-altering facts in school again, like the fact that VHD stands for Virtual Hard Disk. That's an important piece of information for everyone to have in their daily lives. Come on now! Well, anyway, if you did not know what VHD was already, it's exactly what I just said, an obscure video format that was exclusive to Japan that never really took off. And it's really no surprise these things were not super successful in the scheme of things. They were big, they were cumbersome, and they could only hold 30 minutes of media per side of disc. That's right, you had to flip these things over like a laser disc or a vinyl record. So if you're watching Return of the Jedi, for example, it would take 3 discs and 5 flips to get through that thing. Yeah, not the most convenient way to watch a movie, but somebody thought this would work. I guess they didn't realize that VCRs were just a lot more convenient. So, some companies released video magazines on the VHD format, which is kind of like a print magazine, except on a very unsuccessful video format. Sometimes these were collections of trailers for movies. Sometimes they were just all kinds of random clips thrown together and anything under the sun could be involved. And sometimes they were very specific to certain genres, anime being one of those, and thus we got the Anime Vision Video Magazine on VHD. Yes, that's right, there was a video magazine on VHD focused on nothing but anime. But here's the best part. Not only did this magazine feature promos for upcoming titles and behind the scenes segments, kind of like a printed magazine, but it also featured exclusive anime. And guess what? Cosmo's Pink Shock was one of those exclusives. It was released in short bits over 3 issues of the magazine, so technically it was released before Project A-ko. So in reality, did this actually influence Project A-ko? No, that's ridiculous. There's no way that's even a possibility. but it's pretty funny to think about. In reality, the time frames are just a little bit too close for that to even be a thing, but you never know if people were talking behind closed doors, so it is something to consider. But that's enough about that. Back to the original super weird release strategy for this thing. Yeah, that's right. This anime was originally released on one of the most unique and obscure formats in one of the most unique and obscure ways in all of anime history. Well, thank God it made it to VHS down the line. Yeah, this OVA wasn't exactly a huge success on VHS either, but at least it escaped the prison that was VHD. I'm sure that there are some defenders of that format out there that would argue VHD should have been bigger than Purple Rain, but I'm sure there's not many of them. Plus, if you actually wanted to watch this OVA in a much more convenient way, the VHS had to be a godsend. It was all together in one place. And even if someone was a ride or die for a VHD back in the day, I'm sure they bought the VHS version of this thing as well, because if there's one thing that's always been true about anime fans through the years, it's that they will always throw away more money to own the same junk again that they already owned on a different format just to get it again. So there you have it, the complete history, if you will, of Cosmos Pink Shock. The anime that really wanted to be Project A-ko, whether it really realized it or not. I can't see a world where this OVA will be of much interest to anyone outside of a very specific group of 80s anime otaku, like me, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't check it out. While it's not perfect, it's still a good watch today. Sure, the unfortunate timing and weird format of its original release might be the most interesting aspects of it, but then again, there were some pretty influential people involved with this, so I'd say it's worth spending a little bit of time with. When it comes to silly 80s OVAs, you could do a lot worse. And at least this one doesn't take itself too serious, which is kinda nice. Thank you, Cosmos Pink Shock. You were just kind of okay.